Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today we're gonna be making a helmet. It was a while ago we made a helmet, so why not? This time we're gonna make a Judge Dredd helmet, which should be 3D printable. I've already scaled in the background image to real world scale. I did a little bit of research on fan sites and got a rough estimate for a helmet. Obviously making exceptions for different head sizes. We start here with a subdivided cube, which always gives the best results. If you take a sphere, you'll get pinching at the top. So here we're starting to make the template. We're actually going to have two templates involved in this one. We take a good amount of time in the beginning here trying to get the right shape. It's not a part you want to speed through. It's quite critical. Everything is going to be based around this part of the helmet. It's a little bit hard to find the actual shape we need here. References from the side of this helmet, the profile, are quite hard to find, so we guess a little bit. We go up here and we trying to make the back of the helmet represent how the actual shape of a skull, which is wider at the back and thinner at the front. Just playing it by ear here, really, trying to make something look roughly like we want it. So here we duplicate the mesh, so we have one keeping the main shape acting as a template. We want to keep our geometry quite straight. Here we're going to have a ridge right in the middle, almost like a mohawk, and I want this line here to be fairly straight. And to make it straight without deforming the mesh, we need the template to help us, which ultimately means we can do whatever we want with the mesh get into the shape we need, and the template will help us keep the overall shape we're after. For instance, this angled curve, it would completely destroy our mesh. It would not be curved. You can see here, it's already loosening its shape. And now we add the shrink wrap, and you see it will bounce back. Straighten it a few times and then apply the shrink wrap, because when you straighten the vertices and then you shrink them down again, they will draw themselves closer to the mesh and then they will lose their straight positioning. So you can do it a few times until you finally get the result you need. Now we delete one side as it's unnecessary to work on one side. Work on both sides, I mean. So what the plan is here, we are going to make this ridge in the middle, get it to as close as we want it to be, and then this mesh here will then become our new template and we can delete the old one. So there's some inception like modeling going on here. And I take a lot of time on this mesh, really focusing on the geometry, spacing a lot, relying on the loop tools add-on to get some nice spacing. Quite unnecessarily to a certain degree. It's good to have good geometry, but I go a little bit crazy here, but again, it's my attention to detail which maybe goes a little bit overboard here. So here you can see we've collapsed the shrink wrap modifier, so this is now officially our working mesh, which will then become our guide mesh, our template, when we start to cut holes. I've found this to be the best method. We could have tried to use one guide mesh from the very beginning, but we'd have to use quite a lot of restrict them to certain vertices. That mohawk in the middle will always cause us problems, so it's better to have that included in the base mesh. We even do some small adjustments here, as I'm not completely happy with the shape. Somehow here we have some kind of internal mesh which we delete. I'm not sure how it gets created, it's not the first time it happens. So now we duplicate the mesh again. And this, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be our final mesh. although we haven't renamed it yet. Again, due to the lack of good references, we're guessing a lot here. But I don't think it's such a bad problem, a big problem. When I've had a look at the, there was a Sylvester Stallone film from the 90s, I think it was, and also the more recent Carl Urban films, and the masks are different, and if you go look back at the comics, the masks are different, so you have a little bit of creative license here to make things a little bit different if you want to. I always try and stick to as close to originals as possible, but I don't really follow these comics, but I do like the character. One of the hardest parts of this build is probably trying to keep as low geometry as possible. Trying to collapse some edges. You see here at the back we tried to collapse already to reduce as much congestion as possible, because that will cause creases. And this hat is metallic, so you will see creasing. Although the final mesh I create is quite beaten up, a lot of scratches, a lot of dirt, so it does hide a little bit, I guess. So now we've added the shrink wrap modifier, and the small protrusion at the front of the head we've added as a vertex group, which will not be included in the shrink wrap, which is why it's sticking out now and is not attached to the mesh, shrunken together to the mesh. So here you can see we need to make this point, and now we have a lot of extra edges which we don't want, so we're trying to collapse them. We're always judging a little bit about how sharp these edges need to be. Again, you just need to use your judgment, your eyes, see what feels right. See here I'm spacing things out as well as possible. It's never a simple process, these converging edges. You really do have to play around to get some good geometry. Sometimes it's just trial and error. And remember now and again to collapse your shrink wrap modifier, because a lot of the vertices we put in place are still floating around. The shrink wrap modifier shows you how the mesh will be when it's collapsed, but until it's collapsed, the geometry is still essentially out of position. It's very congested up here in this point. When you start these projects, you look at the model you're planning to build and everything seems quite simple, quite straightforward, and you think it's going to be a breeze to build it. And then you start and you see all the small issues which arise, which you really did not predict. So we need a loop on the bottom part of this ridge here. I tried to use the loop tools flatten function, but it doesn't always work. Sometimes it's easier just to delete the vertices and reface. It's looking good so far. So now we test the matte cap here to check our reflections. Everything seems to be running through quite nicely. There's a little bit of a pinching on the front corner where the badge is. It's really difficult to get rid of. So now we try to do the main shape of the helmet, the bottom edge, which is thankfully very simple. It's just a straight cut. And same for the back edge, which is a slight elevation there also. You see often when you have these supporting loops, it gets quite crowded in there. It's hard to slide them and place them. Sometimes it's easier just to cut straight through them. Like here for example, it's just easier to cut straight through instead of taking ages placing. It's looking nice so far. Sometimes you're so focused on the big shape that you miss these small details. The small curve at the top. We try and space things out a little bit more. can see we're a little bit too shallow here on the badge. We're a little bit too centralized. I do go in later. I think it may be between a recording and make this middle ridge a little bit wider. Again, it's not something you need to do, but it annoyed me to the point where I wanted to make it wider. We do one last shrink wrap on this piece, as we've made some changes to the mesh, and then we add the back vertices to the shrink wrap, so it will always be touching the actual helmet, whereas the extrusions forward are not in the vertex group. So it's a simple way of making sure that that badge is always stuck to the helmet. Two corners here we want to make curved. Then we had a bevel modifier just to make sure we catch some edges here when we texture. We bevel a loop there to get a little bit better curvature. Always checking the reflections, make sure there's no issues. Sometimes it's good to clear a part of the mesh when we're going to work on the front piece, and all the vertices at the back will get in our way. We'll end up cutting with a knife through front and back. So It's easier just to hide it. And here again we're guessing a little bit as to the shape of this front ridge. I think it's pretty much straight. Here definitely I'll make some changes. I add a small, you can see that the point towards the corner of the eye, there's a few extra bevels to make it look a bit more curved, but we get rid of them because I find some references which suggest that it's a straighter edge. Starts to become a little bit difficult here because we're trying to add vertices to tighten up the geometry, but at the same time we don't want to get it too congested. Making sure that we have containing loops. If you hide parts of your geometry before you add loops, then it prevents the loop following all the way around your mesh. So then you can try and collapse them at a good place. You can see as we did here on the front part. And sometimes it's good just to put the vertices in place and then try and clean it up later. Decide what you need. Here you can see I'm exactly that. I'm putting the vertices down, and we're coming and clean a little bit later. You can see these two ridges by the eye, they do disappear. I get rid of them because they're not in the reference that I see. In the background reference here, it does very much look like it's almost like a ridge, like an angle. But I find reference later suggests that it is not the case. Here's where we remove them. It reduces our geometry also, which is good. Means we don't need to find and hide edges. This corner of the eye is a cause for a lot of pinching. I think in the end we never really get it completely perfect. Not on the base mesh yet. In any case, to get rid of a pinching completely, you'd need to collapse the modifier, maybe collapse one division, use the shrink wrap to our template, and then those vertices will pop into place. But I try to keep this quite low poly as much as possible. I don't particularly want to collapse the mesh, especially not when we're building. If you're going to print this model, then you can collapse all the subdivisions to make it perfect before printing. Here we are going to create the red rim. And as you can see, luckily our geometry is quite nice here, just to steal the geometry, separate it from the mesh, and then we go in and try and clean it up, because there's a lot of vertices which we don't need. We also need to have support loops around the whole structure as we're going to extrude some thickness. The knife tool saves a lot of time. The flatten tool doesn't always work in certain situations. I find it's surely something I'm doing wrong, or maybe there's just restrictions to the tools. See, this is where the shrink wrap modifier helps us a lot. We're free to move the mesh around, build onto it, and our shrink wrap modifier will save us. You see, I go quite crazy with the geometry on this one, really trying to get it as nice as possible. Now we have the solidify modifier here to try and work out how thick this piece is going to be. It needs to be thick if we're going to print it, and it also needs to be realistic. I mean, this helmet needs to be able to take some punishment. We get a little bit of an idea from the reference how thick this is. Still working on the spacing of this geometry. I think somewhere in my mind I'm thinking this should be a lot nicer than it is. We do get there in the end. Here I tried to do a inset to get this edge, but we've already inset a part of this mesh, so it's quite unnecessary. So I think we just add it by hand. This is me fighting along trying to make it work. It's more effort than it's worth. See, this is where I mean it's good to hide the mesh when you're adding loops. We're also messing up a nice geometry which we've spaced out now, but here I'm trying to get a curve on the top and bottom part here. I don't want to just use the subdivision to get the curve. I want to get a little bit more geometry on the corner here so we have a nice rounded edge. Here we see we're a little bit off center. Needs to be completely flat and centralized if we're going to add the mirror here with no gaps. And we realised it's the same with the helmet part and also the original template, I believe. But it's not a problem, it's just to select the vertices and then drag them into the center once we've activated clipping in the mirror modifier. That's the template fixed. We have internal faces here we need to get rid of. Here we need a loop in the center of the cross, as it's looking a little bit soft and rounded. We have a little bit of a pinch at the bottom here. And we still haven't added that loop in the middle. So now we are making the visor. If you're going to print this model, this is a part you would not necessarily need to be making. I guess you would buy some kind of acrylic or plastic, but this model for myself is going to be a 3D render. I don't know, maybe I'll use it in another project, so I need to have the entire model made in pixels. We're also going to be trying to guess where exactly this visor fits in on the inside. I think we push it outwards towards the metal, We are also going to need to add the foam. Something else we need to think about is function in this helmet. If you look at the references, you see there is foam on the inside of the helmet. And I think if we didn't model it, it would look a little bit naked, a little bit emptier. It's a very simple piece of geometry. So it's worth doing. Again, if you're gonna print this, you would not need to. The foam you could just buy if you wanted to. And we add some thickness to this visor also. If you add the glass or a glass-like shader, you want to get some good reflections, and you need to have depth to it. If you don't, it will be very, very visible and look incredibly fake. Now we need to push it out a little bit so it hits this metal plating. So here we take the geometry to make the foam. So we do cheat a little bit. Really, I would guess that the entire inner helmet is foam, which is unnecessary. It will never ever be seen. So I just take the surrounding edges, which are visible from the outside, and that's all we need to do. Separate that selection, and maybe try and modify to make things a little bit simpler here. Again, we don't need to be so careful with the geometry of this padding. The padding is soft, no sharp edges. Needs to be fairly thick. We try and take a bit of care and attention here not to let it intersect the visor. You can see here by the bottom of the edge of the visor, it's quite visible, I think. Try and make sure we have no intersection here also. It's hard to know how the padding fits in. I guess it would be on the inside of the visor, but also push out against the bottom plating. So we add an edge loop here to try and get that cut. It's a little bit difficult. Oh, not difficult, it's just a little bit fiddly. But like we've always said, as long as you make the effort, it will look good in the end. Finally we get around that in this crease. Because I left it late, we have now to do the inside and outside. We try and sharpen up the plating here. Try and spread out the geometry, but also maintain the sharp edges. So we are approaching the end. A few more minutes left. As normal, I textured this model in Marmoset, which I generally don't record. Drop a comment or if you want to see any of my work in Marmoset. I'm not that fast or brilliant in Marmoset, to be honest. I kind of get along. Here we try and fix the intersecting faces. Eyeballing the thickness of the padding here. So now we get the padding behind the visor. Just need to fix some crazy geometry here. I'm not sure what's happened with these vertices which flew up over the edge. It's quite annoying. We end up applying a modifier just because I think it was the modifier which was causing most problems. When we collapsed it and moved the geometry by hand, it became fine. It worked. So we're pretty much done there. A complete Judge Dredd helmet. And this is what it looked like after the texturing process. I went quite crazy with the dirt and grunge, but I think it matches the theme. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back again next time.